And
Thank you, Laura.
speaking of China, they're ramping up their disinformation campaign to avoid blame, of course, for unleashing the coronavirus on the world. Current and former intel officials now telling Fox that Beijing is upping its spy game on U.S. soil with a focus on manipulating the narrative. Now, one source says that it's about saving face for them. It's about leaking out false info, even to our intelligence apparatus. Joining me now is a man who knows this better than anyone else, Steve Mosher, author of The Bully of Asia. Stephen, this is really troubling. It's not surprising to people like you, or frankly myself, who've been talking about the China threat for decades. But now we see members of the media lavishing China with praise for their response to the virus. What about that?
Yeah, it's astonishing to me. I mean, 20 years ago, we had 8,000 Chinese front companies, people from China carrying out espionage of various kinds, taking it back to China, commercializing it and selling it back to us. But now we have media companies in the United States. I think you always have to follow the money. I think you always have to understand who owns the company now, because once great American media institutions are now owned in whole or in part by Chinese billionaires. I'm not sure I want to name names because they once upon a time were good American institutions. They still have American names, but they're carrying Chinese propaganda. And among the propaganda they're carrying is the idea that the Chinese coronavirus was actually not originated in China, but it came from a lab in the United States.
Well, Steve, the thing about this Chinese student situation in the United States and researchers at our preeminent institutions like Stanford and Harvard and Princeton and MIT, I mean, these are the crown jewels of research institutions in the world, not to take anything away from international and other foreign institutions, but MIT, Stanford, Harvard, this is it. Among the best of the best in the world. What about that? We have the open door policy for Chinese scholars, even with what we saw with Harvard, with the professor working hand in glove with the Chinese. This has to end like yesterday, correct?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, we give hundreds of millions of dollars in research grants to the major research institutions in the United States. And Professor Charles Lieber, you mentioned from Harvard, got $15 million to develop products that he then took to China under the Thousand Talents program, apparently, and was working with the University of Technology in that famous place now called Wuhan, and was paid generously over the years for really selling for pennies on the dollar technology that American taxpayers had paid tens of millions of dollars to develop. It's really, we've got to stop that. And I think that Chinese students and scholars, I know, before they leave China, are all told, if you come across any commercially valuable information in the United States, you should seize it for the motherland. And you should bring it back to China, or you should work in place to continue taking the technology and transferring it to China.
All right.
So
well, Steve,
we've got to keep them out of.
Yeah, and Stephen, we haven't even gotten into the new Chinese technology that has been developed during this crisis. It's being used against innocents around the world, people who have done nothing wrong, and basically spying and tracking people's every movement. Stephen, we'll talk about that next time. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.